The official date for RSVP has now passed,
Right.
Rick, but I guess there's a little bit of leeway for the King's son. The hope is, I think, that they will be there, certainly that Harry will be there to support his father.
What do we know about this coronation route then, and why is it being cut so drastically?
Well, the coronation route, we have two processions. The King's procession, which is the first one, Rick, which leaves from Buckingham Palace and takes what I would describe as a tried and tested route. It'll be very familiar to anyone who has followed things like the Jubilee celebrations in the past, for example, from Buckingham Palace up the Mall through Admiralty Arch, around the south side of Trafalgar Square, along Whitehall to Parliament Square, Broad Sanctuary, and to Westminster Abbey. It's 1.3 miles in total. And they're going to do the same route in what's called the Coronation procession on the return. And that's where we're seeing the big difference between this and the 1953 coronation, because after her coronation ceremony, Queen Elizabeth took a 5-mile route through central London, around Oxford Circus and Regent Street, for example, around Haymarket, so that the maximum crowds could see her travelling through London. So this is much shorter at 1.3 miles. There's also a difference in the carriages being used. On the way to Westminster Abbey, the King and Queen Consort are going to travel in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, which dates back to 2012. So it's rather modern in carriage terms. It's got aircon and it's got suspension.
Wow.
I think that might be a reason why this has been chosen. We've got a monarch and consort in their 70s.
Yes.
The Queen famously described the Gold State Coach as being horrible and not very comfortable at all because it's only suspended on leather straps.
It just looks really lovely though, doesn't it? That's the thing.
It does look very beautiful. They will be using that in the procession from the Abbey though, so we will get to see that very historic 260-year-old 4-ton Gold State Coach.
Sarah, it's less than a month away now. Do you think the buzz around it is the same as the buzz was for the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee in late May last year?
I think it's really difficult to say. Local authorities, I think, have had something like 260 applications for street parties and road closures, which is less than you might expect. But as you mentioned, that the Platinum Jubilee is less than a year ago. And potentially people feel that they've already done a street party within a year. It may be that people want to go into central London and take in the spectacle on May the 6th. But I think we've always had this sense before these big events. Buckingham Palace have always been a little bit anxious before the Platinum Jubilee, the Diamond Jubilee, for example, not quite knowing what the public response might be. And it's only as you get right up to it that you start to feel the buzz. So I'm not entirely sure whether there's the same degree of excitement, whether people are just planning on taking the long weekend off, Rick, or whether they'd prefer to be in central London for it. I think we'll have to wait and see a little bit nearer the time. But as you say, we are less than 4 weeks away now.
Yeah. There is a new royal emoji for the occasion. How much do you think the coronation will be one that brings the royal family into modern times? And I'm not just talking about this emoji, which I couldn't find when I searched for it this morning.
You have to do #coronation.
Oh,
or
I
various
see.
Hashtags, Rick, and it will come up automatically for you. I've just used it for the first time. It's a funny one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we've got this emoji being put out, and then we've got details of the coronation regalia that are going to be used, many items of which date back to the 17th century and the reign of King Charles II. So we've got this bringing together of the very traditional, these ancient traditions, and the more modern. And this is going to be a coronation that takes place in the social media age. We will have camera phones recording that route as the King and Queen Consort process along it. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, to see how Buckingham Palace and the royals try to blend that and how they try to reflect the modern in the ceremony and what King Charles's reign is going to represent, as well as preserving the traditions. And I think from what we've seen today, there are a lot of traditions being preserved, some of them potentially controversial. For example, there is the ivory rod with dove, which is going to be used for the Queen Consort. It had potentially been thought that, given the sensitivities around the use of ivory, might be ruled out. But I think a decision has been made by the palace that there are some occasions where traditions and history
Can be brought
triumph
in.
over more
Yeah.
modern values.
Sarah, should we expect the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to make an appearance at the big event? Because what we know is that they received the invitation and acknowledged the receipt of the invitation without telling us whether or not they were coming.
Yeah, and the official date for RSVP has now passed,
Right.
Rick, but I guess there's a little bit of leeway for the King's son. The hope is, I think, that they will be there, certainly that Harry will be there to support his father, and I believe they are close to making a decision, but we don't know what that decision is yet. This is a massive, massive occasion for the king. And to not have his son there, I think, would be extremely difficult indeed. Look, having him there is also going to present its challenges, isn't it? Because of the family politics, because of the level of attention that the presence of the Sussexes will draw. But contingency plans are being drawn up. And I think we'll look at the Platinum Jubilee as a model for how they might be incorporated in a much more low-key way. We're not going to be seeing them on the Buckingham Palace balcony among all the family, for example.
Sarah, always good to speak with you.
Thank you, Rick.